The glass windows trembled with every car horn echoing from the main street. Friday noon, rush hour, and the crowd pouring into Grant Burgers was packed tight. The air was thick with the scent of frying oil, grilled meat, and human sweat. Fluorescent lights on the ceiling cast a cold white glow, reflecting off tables smeared with ketchup stains and trays yet to be cleared. A little girl was sobbing beside her mother because the hamburger she'd waited so long for still hadn't arrived. The mother bent down to soothe her, but her eyes carried a look of quiet disappointment. "We don't have much money to eat out, but I thought this place would be worth a try." The words were spoken like a whisper, but they struck a deep chord in the mind of the man standing at the end of the line. Michael Grant. He wore a charcoal gray hoodie, a baseball cap pulled low, lightly faded jeans, and unbranded sneakers. No one knew that this man, who looked like just another middle-aged customer, was in fact the CEO of the Grant Burgers chain, a man who had spent his youth building the brand from a tiny roadside stand into a nationwide fast food empire. But today, he wasn't here to sign contracts or give shareholder speeches. He had come to see what the reports couldn't show: the truth behind the growing complaints. Michael moved forward slowly, taking in every detail: the overflowing trash bins, the sticky soda pooling from the dispenser across the floor, customers shaking their heads in frustration. The faces of the employees were exhausted, sunken eyes, slumped shoulders, movements robotic and emotionless. He stood silently. This wasn't the vision he once dreamed of. Grant Burgers to him was never just a place to sell food. It was meant to be a space where people felt respected, could grow, and where customers sensed kindness from the very first bite. A bell jingled as his turn came. At the counter stood a young woman in a wrinkled uniform, brown hair hurriedly tied back, beads of sweat dotting her forehead. Her name tag read, Lena. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that had been forced 1,000 times without thought. "Welcome to Grant Burgers. What would you like today?" Her voice was hoarse, small, and drained of life. Michael smiled gently, pretending to study the menu. In truth, he knew every single word by heart. But right now, he wasn't looking at the menu. He was watching Lana. The way she braced herself to stay composed, her slender hands trembling slightly as she typed the order, eyes darting occasionally toward the kitchen as if seeking help that never came. He ordered a burger, fries, and soda, the most basic meal. At that moment, an argument erupted at the next counter. A middle-aged man slammed his hand on the counter in anger. "I said no onions, and you loaded it with onions. Are you blind?" His voice sharp as a blade. The employee at the counter fumbled, at a loss for what to say. A man in his 40s, dressed in a white shirt and sporting a shiny watch, stepped out from the kitchen area. His face was twisted in irritation, as if the whole world owed him something. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone cold. "This guy's asking to change his order again?" Before the employee could answer, he glanced at Lana, then turned away, pulling out his phone to check the time, as if everything in front of him wasn't worth a moment's attention. Michael took the receipt from Lana and was about to step away when he heard her whisper softly. So softly it felt like a secret meant only for a stranger. "Sorry, they treat us like machines here." He froze. Machines. Those two words pierced straight through him. All his speeches to the staff, all those times he declared, "At Grant Burgers, people are our greatest asset," now felt like a cruel joke. Michael turned back to look at Lana. She had moved on, serving the next customer, but the side glance she cast at the manager, who was now laughing with another employee, was filled with unease and fear. He found an empty table, sat down, and opened his meal box. The hamburger was stone cold, the bun hard, the meat lukewarm. The fries were limp, the soda watered down. This wasn't the food he had once crafted with his own hands. It was something distorted, hollow, soulless. Michael observed more closely. In the kitchen, only two people were scrambling about. One bearded man flipping patties while checking orders, sweat dripping down his face. The other was frying potatoes while simultaneously handling the drive-thru. Overload was clearly an understatement. And the manager, still leaning against the air conditioner, eyes glued to his phone, unmoved. A customer snapped, "Can you please hurry up? I don't have all day to wait." Lana rushed back to the counter, hands grabbing the food bag. But in her haste, it slipped. The burger and fries spilled all over the floor. She froze. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Then the manager's voice rang out, loud, mocking. "Wow, Lana, maybe if you looked where you were going instead of daydreaming, you wouldn't have dropped it." A tense silence rippled outward. Employees froze mid-task. Customers turned to look. Lana's face turned crimson, lips pressed tight, eyes brimming with tears. Michael placed his hand on the table, rose to his feet. The chair groaned. No one knew who he was, but the way he walked, slowly with purpose, sucked the air out of the room. "You're Chad Morrison, right?" he asked, voice calm to an eerie degree. Chad raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, so what?" Michael looked straight into his eyes. "I think you should pick up that food. And if you don't know how to manage, then at the very least, don't insult someone working 3 times harder than you." Silence. Lana's mouth dropped open. Chad squinted. "And who are you to speak to me like that?" Michael inhaled deeply. All his quiet plans, all his intentions to observe from the shadows, disintegrated the moment he saw Lana's tears, saw the wounded silence of people who once believed in his company. He could no longer wait. "Because I run this place," he said slowly. "I'm Michael Grant, CEO of Grant Burgers." A shockwave rippled through the entire room. Nothing would ever be the same again. The ceiling fan whirred above, but it wasn't strong enough to dispel the stifling heat and tension clinging to the restaurant's air. The scent of old frying oil mixed with human sweat created a thick, clinging atmosphere that reeked of exhaustion. After the earlier shock, the entire store seemed suspended in time. A few customers quietly raised their phones to record. Others glanced around in confusion, unsure if what had just happened was real. Chad stood frozen, eyes darting as if trying to find a way to flip the situation. But Michael's gaze didn't waver. Calm, steady, yet like a slow-burning fire beneath still waters. Lana was still crouched on the floor, clutching the fallen tray, too afraid to stand. Her face showed a mix of shock and fear, tinged with something else, a fragile hope. Hope for something she hadn't dared to believe in for a long time. "Fairness." Michael turned to Chad, his voice dropping low like thunder at the end of a storm. "I've heard enough. You're not just an incapable manager. You lack basic respect for others. As of this moment, you are no longer an employee of Grant Burgers." Chad opened his mouth, but couldn't find the words. His throat dry, the glib phrases he once used to dominate others died before leaving his lips. You, you can't. I can. "And I just did," Michael replied, not loudly but with such weight that each word pressed into the tiled floor. Chad muttered something, slipping away toward the back, his strides laced with resentment. The slam of the rear door shattered the silence. A beat passed, then customers began clapping. Not thunderous applause, but one by one, solid, affirming. Lana looked up, eyes glistening. Marco, the veteran cook, peeked out from the kitchen, astonished, and gave Michael a small nod, a silent thank you. Michael took a deep breath and turned back to the counter. He bent down, picked up the dropped food, tossed it in a nearby trash bin, and said, "If anyone hasn't received their order, I'll take care of it. I used to work the register. I doubt I've forgotten how the system works." Lana stood, still shaking. You're really the CEO?" "Yeah, I am, Sam," Michael said with a faint smile, scanning the room. "But today, I'm just another cashier. You'll have to show me how things work again, all right?" Lana nodded, lips pressed tightly together to hold back tears. Not from sadness, but from feeling, for the first time in what felt like forever, that someone was on her side, that she wasn't walking alone through an endless tunnel. Marco stepped out from the kitchen, waving toward Lana. "Take a break. You need to breathe. I've got it in here." "No," Lana shook her head. "I'll finish my shift, but it's the first time I don't feel alone." Michael smiled. He stepped toward the order screen, poking at a few buttons. Lana stood beside him, carefully instructing. "This one selects combos. That one's for extra notes. Oh, and remember to hit the allergen check if someone asks for special requests. The crowd settled. A middle-aged man, Mr. Richard, who had been irate earlier, now loosened his shoulders and gave Michael a very different look. I've got to admit, this cold burger is going to taste very different now. Michael nodded. I promise, next time it won't be cold. In less than 10 minutes, it felt like a new energy had been pumped into the store. Lana moved faster, her voice steadier. Marco was whistling a soft jazz tune from the kitchen. A small child ran to the counter and handed Michael a crumpled piece of paper, a scribbled drawing of a smiling burger. Are you the boss here? Michael knelt down to accept the picture. Are you an artist? This should be hanging in our headquarters. Laughter broke out, not the mocking kind like Chad's earlier, but genuine, relieving laughter, like a rain shower after a drought. When the first lunch rush faded, Michael called the staff together. They gathered in a small corner near the soda machine, where just hours earlier, spilled soda had pooled. Lana, Marco, a quiet kid named Noah, and 3 new shift workers all stood around him. Their eyes had changed, no longer wary or distant, but filled with hope. I know today's been a hard day, Michael began, and I also know it's not the only hard day you've had. Marco leaned against the table and exhaled. It's been months like this, boss. Then let today be the start of something different. I'm not here to perform, not here to film some campaign or chase headlines. I'm here to listen, to see, and to fix things. He looked each of them in the eye. If you have something to say it. This isn't an evaluation, it's a conversation. Lana was first to speak, her voice still trembling, but clear. The work schedule isn't stable. Some weeks I get 6 days, some weeks just 2. No one tells us in advance. Mummy, Marco added, I'm alone in the kitchen during lunch. If I wash my hands to use the restroom, customers wait 10 minutes. Noah, the quiet one, spoke hesitantly. Previous managers never helped. They just pointed fingers. Michael took notes. He didn't argue, didn't explain. He just listened. And when the meeting ended, Lana looked at him, not with tears this time, but with something deeper, a spark of trust rekindling. You say you'll fix it, but we've heard that before. Michael nodded honestly. I know. So this time I won't just say it, I'll do it. And if I don't, you be the first to remind me of what I promised. Under the soft lights of the fast food joint, amid the hum of the fryer and the sound of customers placing orders, something had shifted. Not something grand or explosive, but enough for everyone to feel. That kindness could begin with just one person willing to step up and say, enough. The back door creaked open and slammed shut, leaving behind a thick silence like a curtain drawn over the room. A few employees still stood in the corners, uncertain whether to return to work or brace for whatever might come next. No one dared to speak. It felt as though a sacred rule had just been broken, an unspoken law suddenly dissolved, and more frightening than anything else was the uncertainty that followed. But Michael Grant didn't step back. He walked to the center of the restaurant, removed his old baseball cap, and gently brushed a hand over the silver creeping into his temples. Turning to Lana, he spoke like a longtime coworker. Can you help me log back into the system? I want to start processing the pending orders. Lana hesitated for a moment, but quickly collected herself. Yes, just enter store code 0237. The test account is still active. I've never trained a CEO before, though. Michael smiled a little self-deprecatingly. And I've never forgotten that I once worked behind this counter. It only took a few minutes for Michael to get the hang of the POS system again, albeit a bit slower than the younger employees with their nimble fingers. But what caught everyone's attention wasn't that he was there. It was that he was truly working. He asked customers about their orders, confirmed no onions, extra cheese, every detail. When he made a mistake, he didn't hesitate to ask Lana for help. Once he fumbled the total. Lana whispered, "It's $7.42. Just type in 7420. Michael chuckled. Looks like I still need a training session. The sound of soft laughter began to ripple through the team. Marco from the kitchen looked up and held a burger high. Lana, Order 185's ready. Lana reflexively moved, but this time Michael was quicker. I've got it, he said, and personally carried the tray to table 5. On his way back, an older customer, Mrs. Helen, was waiting at the counter. She tilted her head, watching him, then let out a chuckle. I take it this is your first day on the job, young man. Michael laughed, bowing slightly. A bit late to start a career in food service, but I've still got energy to spare. Mrs. Helen nodded approvingly and handed him a small, handwritten note. I'll be your first reviewer today. Do well, and I'll be back every week. Lana leaned over and whispered, she once chewed Chad out for messing up her order 3 times in a row. Michael nodded, accepting the note like a formal contract. He carefully keyed in the order and turned to Marco. Marco, can you make me a burger with no onions, extra veggies, and toast the bun a little longer? Marco raised his eyebrows. First time I've seen a manager remember special instructions like that. Michael replied, I'm not a manager. Today I'm a teammate. No one said anything, but in the eyes of Marco, Lana, and even the new hires who had only been there a few weeks, something shifted. Something unspoken. Like the soft wind that follows a storm, fresher, gentler. By mid-afternoon, the crowd began to thin. Marco finally stepped outside for a drink of water, something he hadn't done in 3 weeks. Lana sat near the window, quietly eating from her cold lunchbox. Michael was still wiping tables, gathering trash, and heading back toward the kitchen. While cleaning, he spotted an old apron hanging in a hidden corner. Deep red, faded, with hand-stitched words at the edge of the pocket. Integrity, dedication, Grant Burgers. He picked it up, hand pausing. It was the slogan he once printed on every menu, every takeout box, every sign when the brand was new. But over time, due to financial strain, efficiency demands, branding decisions, the slogan had been removed. Marco, Michael called softly, do you know where this apron came from? Marco glanced over, his expression softening. It belonged to Sarah, the original cook here. She left 2 years ago after Chad was promoted. Why? Chad didn't like older employees who wouldn't update their thinking, but she was the one who always cleaned the fryer before leaving, always left notes for the next shift. We used to call her the soul of the kitchen. Michael gripped the apron's edge and then gently placed it on the nearby chair. Thank you for keeping it. Marco nodded. I knew someday someone would remember what it meant. By late afternoon, the next shift began arriving. The younger staff walked in, visibly surprised to see the CEO stacking burgers, and Lana laughing with Mrs. Helen in a corner. Michael took the initiative to greet each of them, shaking hands, asking names. A curly-haired boy named Jay blurted, You're the boss? You look way different than in the photos. Michael laughed. Photos have a little help from Photoshop, you know. The evening passed more smoothly. Marco had time to train a new worker on proper fry temperatures. Lana stood confidently at the register, no longer glancing around in fear. Michael took notes on things to fix, sticky POS keys, a leaking drink nozzle, a broken kitchen AC unit. Toward the end of the shift, he asked everyone to pause for a quick meeting. They gathered around a table in the customer seating area. Tomorrow, things begin to change. I've already outlined a new HR policy, adjustments in wages, shift scheduling, meal support, and more. But before all of that, I want you to know, I've seen it with my own eyes, and that alone means I can't look away. No one responded at first. Then Lana spoke, no longer trembling. You know, I was going to quit last week, but today, I think I'll stay a while longer. Michael nodded. I'm very glad you will, and I'll do the rest to make sure you never regret it. The streetlights outside had turned on. Marco folded his apron and handed it to Michael. Keep this. Let it remind you, this place used to be something to be proud of. Michael took it, gently smoothing the worn fabric. A humble token, but one that carried an entire past and a promise for the future. And he knew tomorrow when he returned to the office, the reform plan would no longer be just an idea. It would be an order, starting from this very place and from that long-forgotten red apron. That morning, Grant Burgers opened earlier than usual. The morning sun hadn't yet dried the dew clinging to the signage when Michael Grant arrived. No hoodie, no worn-out sneakers. Today, he had returned as himself, the CEO of the entire chain. But it wasn't the suit he wore that silenced the restaurant. It was the look in his employees' eyes. Quiet, serious, tinged with anticipation. Not fear, but the weight of waiting to see if yesterday's promise would truly become reality. Lana stood behind the counter checking inventory. She jumped, dropping her receipt as soon as she saw Michael walk in. From the kitchen, Marco peeked out and whistled long. The boss is dressed for a boardroom today, but still looks like he belongs in the kitchen. Michael chuckled, stepped closer to the counter, and held up the red apron Marco had handed him the day before. Now washed, ironed, and embroidered with 3 new words beneath the familiar motto, renewal. I promised I'd be back, and as you said, Lana, this saw on him. This time I'll let actions do the talking. Lana smiled softly, though a trace of tension still lingered in her expression. So, where do we begin? We begin by erasing the old shift schedule. The whole store paused for a beat. Michael pulled out a folder and revealed a new schedule, printed in color, signed by him, with a note in red. Each shift includes an official break. No one works more than 8 hours without a proper lunch. Marco whistled again, this time full of admiration. I've waited 3 months to hear that. Lana hesitated. And wages? Michael pulled out another document and held it up. All full-time employees receive a 15% raise. Part-timers get an hourly increase, effective this week. A loud, "Oh my God," burst from Noah, the youngest on the team. Boss, are you trying to make us cry before opening time? Laughter broke out, this time not out of politeness. It was real, like the first breath of fresh air after months of suffocation. Michael stepped onto a small platform near the counter, once used to display promotional boards, now a makeshift stage. This week, I'll visit every store. No warning. I'll work the register, scrub the machines, fry the potatoes, and I want to hear every story. The good, the bad, the not so good. I want to know it all. Lana suddenly asked, what if the new manager turns out to be another Chad? Michael responded instantly, then they won't be manager anymore. We've changed the hiring process, and this time the ones who recommend new managers will be you. That sentence felt like a gust of wind clearing the last layer of doubt from their hearts. Lana looked at him for a long moment, then turned to her colleagues and said, then I guess this really is a new beginning. That afternoon, the restaurant was busier than usual, not because of a promotion, but because a video clip of the CEO working behind the counter had gone viral on social media the night before. People came to see for themselves a CEO elbow deep in the kitchen. Some came out of curiosity, but they stayed for something else. Michael stood beside Lana, processing orders like a seasoned cashier. No more fumbling, he had learned fast, and didn't hesitate to own up to mistakes. Once he forgot to add sauce to Mr. Richards' order, the grumpy customer from the day before. Lana moved to fix it, but Michael beat her to it. Let me handle this. I forgot. I own it. But next time, you'll be the one forgetting to thank me for a perfect burger. Mr. Richard burst out laughing. You're getting the hang of jokes now, huh? I give you a 9 out of 10, -1 for forgetting I like my bun burnt. By evening, staff began rotating their breaks under the new schedule. Marco got a 30-minute mid-shift break for the first time ever. Noah actually ate lunch in the employee area instead of rushing bites while washing trays. Lana quietly reviewed the new schedule, and next to her name, she drew a tiny heart. When someone asked, she just smiled and said, just a reminder, today's the first day I felt like more than just a hired hand. When the shift ended, Michael asked the remaining staff to stay for a bit, not for a meeting, not for a report, just to listen. He handed out blank feedback slips. No names needed. Anyone could write whatever they wanted, criticism, suggestions, complaints. Then he set down a wooden box, hand-labeled, honest box. Marco joked, boss, should we install a camera above that? Michael replied calmly, cameras are for surveillance. This box is for trust. Lana finished writing, folded her paper, and slipped it into the box. She didn't say anything. But as she stood, she paused in front of Michael. Her voice was steady now, like someone who had finally looked her own fears in the eye. This is the first promise I've ever believed in, from someone who wasn't family, from a CEO. Michael looked at her for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. Then help me keep that promise. Lana shook his hand firmly, without hesitation, full of weight and purpose. In that moment, the red apron embroidered with renewal hung quietly on its hook. But something within each person had truly come back to life. Not the burgers, not the procedures, but belief and kindness. The kind that had faded beneath cold meals and weary sighs was now returning, little by little, under the hands of a CEO who dared to stand behind the counter like a trainee. The afternoon breeze swept through the spotless glass panels, carrying with it the golden light of sunset that glowed over the sign on the restaurant wall. Respect doesn't come from a name tag, but from how you treat others. Just beneath it stood Lana Brooks at the counter, adjusting the collar of her uniform, her gaze no longer evasive but steady and confident. A month had passed since the day Michael Grant walked into Grant Burgers as a stranger, and everything now felt like a whole new chapter. The air no longer carried the stale scent of exhaustion. Instead, it was filled with the crisp aroma of freshly fried fries, the smoky char of grilled meat, soft laughter from employees during shift changes, and genuine thank yous from customers. Not polite, but heartfelt. The store now ran like a well-oiled machine, powered not by force, but by people who were genuinely happy. Lana no longer stood at the register. She was now the assistant manager, unanimously chosen by the team. Marco still manned the grill, but now had two additional cooks, each handling their own station. Noah, the once timid boy, was now in charge of training new employees. Everyone had found their place, not just in their job, but in a team that respected and uplifted one another. The honest box now sat permanently in the corner of the wall, always brimming with notes, feedback, concerns, or simply words of gratitude. One note, written in neat cursive, read, "Today, a customer said I had a beautiful smile. Thank you to my team for helping me smile for real." Michael walked in wearing a simple suit, but his eyes still carried the sharpness of a leader who had once immersed himself behind a disguise. This time, no one was startled. No one was confused. Just nods, familiar greetings, and a voice calling from the kitchen. "Boss, stay away from the fryer. Last time you burned a whole batch of fries." Laughter broke out. Michael raised both hands in surrender and stepped away from the kitchen, heading toward the counter where Lana was standing with a group of customers. "Remember Mrs. Helen?" Lana said. "She sent us homemade apple pie and a note that said, 'A gift for the place that made me believe young people still know how to listen.'" Michael smiled, his eyes sweeping across the store. "Feels like an entirely different place." Lana nodded. "And it feels like we're finally working in a real version of Grant Burgers. Not just a place that sells food, but a place where people feel valued." Marco came out of the kitchen, apron slung over one shoulder. "Cut to the chase, Lana. Ask the boss if we're officially one of the top-rated stores yet." Michael pretended to ponder. I remember there are at least 500 branches." Lana cut in mock serious. "We'll accept second place, as long as the first doesn't go to Chad." Laughter erupted again, this time drawing in nearby customers. One of them, a young woman, stepped up and said, "I came here 2 months ago. Coming back today, it feels completely different. Truly different." Michael turned to her, nodded. Change always begins with people who care about the smallest things. That evening, after the workday ended, Michael invited the whole team to sit together in their familiar circle. No speech, no announcements, just a conversation between people who had gone through something together. "We've done great work here," he began, "but this isn't the finish line. This is just the start." Lana asked, "So what's next, boss?" Michael looked around and spoke gently. "I'll keep going to other stores. No advance notice, no real name. But next time I'll change my disguise because I think you'll recognize me too easily." Marco joked, "Next time, don't call a burger a meat sandwich like you did on your first day." Everyone laughed, but beneath the laughter was gratitude for someone who had dared to step down, dared to admit what he hadn't seen, and dared to fix it from the inside out. Before leaving, Michael glanced again at the quote on the wall. Lana stepped beside him and said softly, "I proposed we put it in every store across the system, so anyone who walks in remembers, every change starts with respect." Michael nodded. "Encourage from people like you." He walked out into the soft yellow glow of the streetlights. No fanfare, no applause, just a wave from Marco, a nod from Lana, and the hopeful eyes of young people he had worked alongside. When he reached the parking lot, Michael paused and looked up at the Grant Burgers logo glowing against the night sky. It wasn't just the name of a brand, it was a promise, and this time he knew he wouldn't let anyone down again. 1 month, one restaurant, one well-timed decision, and most importantly, a CEO who didn't just remember how to make a good burger, but remembered how to treat people right. On a late weekend afternoon, a thin veil of clouds covered the city sky, the sunlight faint yet still strong enough to stream through the high-rise windows. In an office on the 32nd floor, the glow from a computer screen lit up the contemplative face of Michael Grant. Before him lay a series of reports: customer satisfaction surveys, employee turnover statistics, monthly sales across branches. Lines highlighted in green indicated key metrics, numbers that, just months ago, would have seemed impossible. The phone on his desk buzzed gently, a notification from internal communications. The story from Branch 57 has gone viral on social media, with over 3 million shares. Proposal to feature Lana Brooks in the upcoming brand campaign. Michael leaned back in his chair, fingers interlaced across his chest. He remembered clearly the first day he walked into that store, as a disguised Michael sitting among a long line of customers, surrounded by grumbles, dirty trays, and an overwhelming air of apathy. Now that same place had become the system's model. Sales up 28%, five-star reviews at 93%, and zero resignations for 30 consecutive days. He stood and walked toward the window, gazing out over the city. In the distance, one of Grant Burger's massive signs lit up with the new slogan, "Where people are the focus, not just the customers." Next to it, a photo of Lana smiling, not as an employee, but as a leader. Meanwhile, at Branch 57, Lana had just finished her shift. She took off her headset, filed the last stack of surveys into the drawer, and pulled out her phone. A message from an unknown number lit up the screen. "Remember the first burger you sold me when I joined? I just got promoted to night shift manager at Branch 102. Thank you for making me believe I deserve more than what Chad ever said." Lana read it again and again, then let out a small laugh. She stepped out of the store into the twilight, just as the street lights flickered on. But within her, everything was bright. No more fear, no more sense of being stuck. She had made it through. And more importantly, she had pulled others out of the darkness with her. In the reflection on the glass door was the silhouette of Lana Brooks, assistant manager, once the girl trembling behind the register, now a symbol of inspiration for hundreds of employees across the system. Behind that reflection, still visible, was a handwritten note from Marco that had never been removed. "Here, everything starts again with trust." A week later, Michael stepped into a large conference hall, the venue for the annual national management meeting. On stage, an LED screen flashed through key moments. Michael entering the store, the moment Lana refused to clean Chad's uniform, a shot of Marco wiping sweat from his brow in the kitchen, and the final image of Lana shaking Michael's hand after their end-of-shift meeting. Applause broke out as he took the stage. Not applause for his title as CEO, but for a man who had chosen to descend into the heart of the system to understand and change it. Michael looked around and began with a gentle question. Has anyone here ever forgotten they were once an employee? Silence filled the hall. "I did," he continued, "and I had to step down, strip away the title, to feel again the aching feet, the resigned stares, the quiet apologies from employees no one bothered to hear. And in return, I heard not complaints, but truth. He paused, his gaze settling on a seat in the middle of the room where Lana sat, dressed in a simple, tidy blazer. She didn't know she was about to be called. Lana Brooks, Michael said, was the first to tell me I was wrong without knowing who I was. And that's why I'm inviting her on stage. Not to honor her, but to remind us all, real change doesn't start with power. It starts with the courage of those at the very bottom. Oh, thunderous applause. Lana stepped up, didn't speak, just nodded and smiled. But that smile spread through the entire system like a wave of inspiration. A reminder that kindness and integrity don't need loud voices, only the right action at the right moment. Later that day, Michael sat in his car on the way home. Through the window, he saw one Grant Burgers after another, each glowing warmly from within where people like Lana, Marco, Noah were still writing the next chapter of the journey. He suddenly recalled a saying his father once scribbled on the back of the notebook he used when first opening the restaurant. If you want to lead, start by picking up the dirty spoons. Michael smiled. Today he hadn't just bent down, he had stayed. And that was enough to change everything.